This video is rated B for you'd better back on out of here if you don't want spoilers, buddy. It's easy to forget just how magical the world of Hydaelyn is, since we're exposed to it on a regular basis. Floating crystals, arcane animals, and more can be observed by most people. And yet, not everyone cares about magic or spellcraft. Not everyone wants to become a powerful witch, wizard, or archmage, even if they could. Most people simply accept that Aether, the primary source of magic, exists in all things, and they don't think much more on the matter beyond that. Magic is so common that they simply don't care that it exists. But like most things, there is a yin to this yang. While there are people who couldn't care less about the arcane arts, there are those who are constantly trying to push its limits and learn new things. Sometimes they push too far, and other times they realize that some magic is simply too dangerous to be worth the risk. These spells, rituals, and incantations eventually become known as forbidden magic. Gather around, my friends, for today we'll defend ourselves from ignorance as we come to understand the nature of the forbidden. The most common question one would have when hearing about forbidden magic is, why is it forbidden in the first place? The answer to that question, like most things in life, is usually much more complicated than it looks. Many people would simply say something is forbidden because it's evil, but then it becomes a question of who decided that it's evil. This brings us to our first step in understanding the nature of the forbidden, and that is culture. Indeed, where you are in the world drastically changes the nature of what is considered acceptable and forbidden. For example, while the Garleans have famously said that Eorzeans are akin to savages, most Eorzeans would look at the Zela of the Azim Steppe and call most of their choices utterly barbaric. In the end, it's all a matter of perspective. Magic is treated much the same way. Some spells, rituals, and departments of the arcane arts are seen as entirely reasonable in one part of the world and yet completely abandoned in another part. This distinction is easily observable by looking at the countries of Old Sharlayan and Razat Han. Even though Sharlayan researchers are known to make new breakthroughs on a regular basis, there are some fields they consider to be off limits to those that haven't proven themselves mature enough to handle such knowledge. Things involving Voidsent and the 13th Shard usually fall under this category. Meanwhile, such research into the 13th is entirely acceptable within Razat Han, so long as the people in question have proven that they are taking the necessary safety precautions. And yet, even though we now understand that the concept of forbidden magic isn't always universal, there are still some things that most civilizations would agree you should never do. I personally feel that these things can fall into two distinct categories of forbidden magic: the unethical and the unpredictable. We'll start with the more recognizable of the two, unethical magic. Now, just because something is dangerous doesn't mean it's unethical. After all, the world of Hydaelyn can be a very dangerous place, so knowing how to defend yourself becomes very important depending on your lifestyle. No, this type of forbidden magic becomes such as it usually has a drastic and sometimes permanent impact on the world itself. The greatest example of this would be primal summoning. Most Eorzeans know about this forbidden art because of the beast tribes, but the reason that it's unethical isn't simply because of tempering. A primal's existence is a constant drain on the ambient aether around them. If the primal lives long enough, all life around them would eventually start to wither and die. This is what makes it forbidden, as the primal would be causing permanent damage to everything around them if left unchecked. The entire reason no one considers summoners to be unethical is because their summoned spirits are only given enough aether to complete a task before disappearing. The same thing can be said when the primals were summoned to fuel the Ragnarok. They were created simply to perform a task, and once it was over, they were gone. Thusly, the rituals to create a primal that endures past a certain point was and still is, a type of forbidden magic. Another well-known and very forbidden spell school is that of necromancy. Necromantic rituals are forbidden for a couple reasons. Firstly, most people don't want to see the bodies of their friends and loved ones perverted in such grotesque ways. The use of traitor spurn on the city-state of Sildee is considered one of the most depraved and unethical acts in the Sixth Astral Era because of this. But there is a second reason. There are many necromancy spells that prevent the souls of the deceased from naturally returning to the ethereal realm after death. To force a spirit to stay on the material plane is literal torture, driving the spirit mad and making them prone to acts of extreme violence. However, with both these things in mind, necromancy could be considered a noble art, but only if the bodies and souls were offered to the necromancer willingly. However, people aren't exactly lining up to offer their cadavers to mages because of how horrible a reputation necromancy has gained over literally thousands of years. This spell school has been the source of so much pain across so many generations that necromancy may be considered a forbidden art forever. Next, we'll discuss how most cultures forbid anything involving void scent. The reason that rituals regarding void scent are forbidden is largely the same as primal summoning. To conjure a void scent is to invite a ravenous entity that wants nothing more than to drink the living aether of our world. This usually involves said void scent committing acts of mass murder. However, the Reapers of Northern Ilsebard seem to have found a loophole to this problem. The Reapers never intend to summon a void scent from the 13th. Instead, they form a contract, and from that contract, an avatar is created. They never truly summon or conjure an actual void scent, so technically they're not using forbidden magics. But while this contract isn't truly unethical, many cultures would still be wary of a Reaper's choices given the risks involved. And the last bit of unethical magic we'll discuss has been abused for thousands of years. These are the spells and rituals that are meant to fundamentally change something's physiology. I feel like I don't need to reach much further than the abominations of Azisla to explain why it's forbidden. After all, Scylla was a normal woman before she fell victim to Amon's twisted experiments. The Allegan Empire showed the risks that come with such drastic augmentation, and some of these practitioners were killed by the very creatures and people they toyed with. Forcibly molding something's aether like that disturbs the victim to the point that they'll eventually go mad. But do not confuse this for glamours, as making yourself look like a different person or animal doesn't change who and what you are. It's more like wearing a suit made of aether, and once that suit runs out of power, it simply disappears. And no, Fantasias don't count either, as those technically don't even exist. Or at least, they don't exist in the way you're probably thinking. But while we're on this topic, your friends and family have told me that they're concerned you've become addicted to the blue juice, but don't worry, I'm here to help you overcome this. We'll talk after class. But these are just some examples of magic made forbidden because of the unethical results they produce. Next, we'll be moving on to the second kind of forbidden spells, things that are banned not because they're considered evil, but because they're just too unpredictable. These are spells that could place the lives of the caster and those around them into jeopardy. Because of this, when it comes to creating new spells and rituals, there are many things to take into consideration. And just because you succeeded in creating a new form of magic doesn't always mean that it was worth it. Maybe the cost of the spell is too high, maybe it poses too great a risk to the caster, or perhaps there's a chance that the magic will make things worse instead of better. These spells are made forbidden for a variety of reasons. One simply needs to ask themselves, does the spell technically work? Yes. But is it worth the risk? No. This is what categorizes an unpredictable and thus forbidden spell. It's by understanding how and why this magic fails that we can inform ourselves and hopefully create more reliable magic. The spell we are going to use as an example of this is one you're likely very familiar with. It is called Flow. Flow is a type of long-range teleportation magic that, in theory, allows the caster to teleport vast distances without needing the guidance of an aetherite crystal. But therein lies the problem. It only works in theory. In practice, the spell is far too unstable to ever be considered reliable. Teleportation involves casting yourself into the life stream in order to bend the laws of physics and reappear somewhere else entirely. When you teleport via aetherite, the crystal itself acts like a lifeline, something for your essence to follow as you safely reappear on the other side. Flow does not have these safety precautions. Thus, it was named Forbidden so that no one else would die from casting it. The witch known as Matoya was entirely correct in chastising Y'shtola for using it, because if it wasn't for this Makote's powerful connections, she would have died from casting it on both occasions. In fact, a spell similar to Flow was used to move the entire Isle of Val into the lifestream. This was done in an attempt to kill both the Elder Primal Eureka and the Ascian known as Emerololth. The only one who survived that entire ordeal was Kryl Baldessian, and only because she had awoken to the powers of the Echo. If you're interested in learning more about that tragic tale, I've told that entire story in another lesson. But that will be all from me for now. I hope you leave this lesson with a better understanding of forbidden magic and why it's seen as such. But never forget, even black and white magic were seen as forbidden spell schools for more than 1,000 years, and now these arts are steadily being taught to those trusted with the knowledge. If something is forbidden, learn and understand why it is before daring to engage with it. But with all that being said, I do hope you all research responsibly. And until next we meet, stay safe, my friends. Thank you all for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe and share this with your fellow adventurers? With your help, I'll try to reach out even further and bring even greater stories to you. Although, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my biggest contributors. A grand thank you to Rovakis, Sagemouse, Sizani, and Tyradox, with an additional nod to the scholarships on screen. Links to things like my Twitter and that of my channel artist Caddy can be found in the description. Thank you all for your viewership as well as your support, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day. Class dismissed.